Considering how popular family-sized SUVs are, there really aren't that many of them powered by nothing but electrons, and it makes so much sense. I mean, their footprints are bigger, which means bigger batteries, and that should provide more range. And then as far as their packaging goes, there should be more space inside since their powertrains are more compact.
Well, it seems like the industry is finally making its move because the Hyundai Ioniq 9 and the VinFast VF9 are two of the latest three-row EVs to hit the market. They're both really uniquely styled and offer tons of amenities, but when it comes down to those EV essentials, one of them absolutely nails the assignment and the other comes up a bit short.
For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. In an industry where visual impact says a lot, both of these make bold statements, and I think the word polarizing probably applies to both of them, although I find the VF9 objectively more stylish than the Ioniq 9.
I do think that's true, but Hyundai has done a lot of work to the Ioniq 9 to help differentiate it, especially the front end, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I do like this boat tail effect, and these pixels are kind of cool because they help connect it to the other Hyundais, but other than that, there's really no telling that this is a Hyundai.
Now, if you take a look at this thing, it's obviously a lot lower. That roof line, it's super sleek, almost like a wagon's. It doesn't cut into headroom though. That's the best part. In the first and second rows, tons of it. Where the problems start to develop is beyond that. The third row is very cramped, and so is this cargo area.
And just by looking at them side by side, you can already see that the Hyundai makes so much better use of all of its space. And the third row is also mounted a lot lower, so there's still lots of headroom in the third row, even for adults. And it's kind of surprising to see how the Ioniq 9 just makes smarter use of all of that space, especially since the two of them are so similarly sized.
All right, guys, right off the jump, you should know we've done individual reviews of both of these vehicles. So if you really want to dive into the details, check those out. You can find them on the YouTube channel as well as autotrader.ca/editorial. That's also where you can find the written reviews, as well as written reviews of so many other vehicles, lots of analysis, expert opinion, and our podcast. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube as well as to the podcast, and check out our editorial page because there's lots of good stuff on there. Anyways.
So much good stuff on there.
After that little digression, we should talk about the sales strategy of this thing in particular, because it is sort of unique compared to the Ioniq 9.
Right, so this one comes with all-wheel drive only, correct?
Yeah, there's only two trims. There's the Eco and then there's the Plus. That's what we are driving now, versus the Ioniq 9 that's got 5 different versions, including rear-wheel drive versions, but that's how you maximize the range in that thing. So I gotta say, as much as I like the diversity of the Ioniq 9's lineup, I kind of prefer the simplicity of this one.
I agree with that, just because digging through their build and price is very, very complicated.
So dual motor, all-wheel drive, of course, 402 horsepower, 457 pound-feet of torque. Now the Ioniq 9 makes 422 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque.
And that means that one can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in a claimed 5.2 seconds, which is crazy. Meanwhile, the VF9 does the same sprint to 100 in 6.7 seconds. So it's quite a bit slower, but I don't think that this is a slow EV.
No, and here's the interesting thing. If you take a look at the all-wheel drive version of the Ioniq 9, but not the Plus version, not the performance all-wheel drive setup, the 0 to 100 kilometer an hour time is the exact same as this, 6.7 seconds. Here is my hot take, and I had the same one in my standalone video. I actually think VinFast and Hyundai with that version, they're both onto something here. I think this is better. Yeah, I know EVs can be quick, but to me it's unnecessary. And there's really no scenario where 6.7 seconds to highway speed should be considered slow. So I actually really like the execution here in terms of performance.
And driving wise, I think I really like what's going on here too. I think it's very smooth, maybe not as smooth as what we get in the Ioniq 9, but I also like the steering. It has quite a bit of resistance and it feels not too light, which is great.
Yeah, this is where you start to see some of the issues in terms of the lack of refinement, I think, next to the Ioniq 9, because when you get into this, on its own, in isolation, you get behind the wheel of the VF9 and you go, yeah, this thing is fine. It drives pretty well. It gets a little bit uncomfortable, but not, troublingly so. So it feels okay, but then you get into the Ioniq 9 and you go, oh, okay, that's just much more refined. It's smoother. It's able to quell bumps in the road more. It just feels a generation or two newer than this one.
Yeah, and something else that we should probably talk about is that the VF9 has a terribly large turning circle.
Yeah, it is very odd to me just how much different it is than the Ioniq 9, especially considering how similarly sized they are.
Yeah, and it just shows up all the time when you're driving it, like parking it, doing a U-turn, all of those things take way more effort here than it does in the Ioniq. And that's the kind of stuff you'll notice day to day that kind of just gets in the way.
Yeah, guys, I took the Ioniq 9 through a drive-through situation and it was fine. I took the VF9 through the car wash and I had to do a 2-point turn. Not because I messed up, literally just because the turning circle is that much wider than it's able to accommodate in those typical car wash drive-throughs. So that was kind of embarrassing, but also a little bit troubling because it means that this thing isn't quite as maneuverable as the Ioniq 9. And their wheelbases, virtually identical, same with their overall lengths and their widths. I mean, aside from the height, they are quite similar when you look at their dimensions.
And interestingly, this one rides a bit more harshly than the Ioniq 9, which is weird to me because this has an air suspension.
But then the other thing that you noticed in the Ioniq 9, and I did too, in that tester in particular, is it kind of jostles and rocks back and forth over rough roads. It feels like the back end is kind of wiggling a little bit. I didn't experience that on the first drive, so that is something that is at least worth looking into on your test drive. Now, something that kind of ties into the ride quality, you can feel the sort of stiffness and the weight of this battery pack more than you can the one in the Ioniq 9. This one is 123 kilowatt hours, so 13 more than the one in the Ioniq 9.
But it doesn't translate into more range, which is kind of surprising. I think that comes down to the efficiency of both vehicles. And the Ioniq 9, every single one comes with a minimum of 500 kilometers, which is a lot. That's higher than average these days.
But you were doing even better earlier this week.
I was. So I charged it up to 100% yesterday, and it was showing me that there was like 670 something kilometers on the clock, which was out of this world. And I want to test it more just to see how accurate it is. But even those projections I thought were very impressive.
Absolutely. Now, in fairness to this thing, 518 kilometers, I think, is the range of the Eco version. This one, 468, I believe. Still not bad, just not as good as the Ioniq 9. And then the other thing we should talk about, charging.
Yeah, so the Ioniq 9 can accept charging speeds of up to 350 kilowatts, which is the fastest that's available right now, so that's great. This one, the VF9, can only accept 160, which is still pretty good, I think.
Yeah, and then the other thing to consider is that those fast charging speeds are great. And don't get me wrong, they cut charging times in ideal conditions, of course. I think this thing is good for about 40 minutes versus in the Ioniq 9, it's about 25 to do that 10 to 80% jump. So you do see it in, kind of real time. The downside is long-term battery degradation. Faster speeds mean quicker battery degradation. So I do like that VinFast seems to be playing the long game with its vehicles versus Hyundai giving you those very fast charging speeds, but you don't know what they're going to look like in 5 or 10 years.
That's a great point. So this VF9 has adjustable regen braking, which is nice to see. And there's technically one pedal driving, but we noticed some weirdness with the way it operates.
Yeah, so when I was driving, I love one pedal driving. I know not everyone out there does, but I really like it. It also helps to kind of gamify the experience, so I find it more engaging. So I had it in its highest setting, and then I turned off creep mode, which I hate that name. But basically, creep mode on means that it'll roll away as you release the brake, just like a gas-powered vehicle would. But when you bring it to a full stop, unless you get on the mechanical brakes right away, it wants to roll either forward or backwards. I guess there's no gear. There's not like a one-speed transmission like you get in some EVs. And so it wants to roll away, which is kind of weird because it's not what you expect in an electric vehicle, and it's something that the Ioniq 9 doesn't do.
I find that whole situation just kind of crazy, and I really wish that VinFast would fix it because it's kind of unsafe.
And then the last point on regen braking is I find this system very inconsistent. So even in its strongest setting, it doesn't always work the same way. Sometimes you're expecting it to slow the vehicle down and it doesn't. Other times it does, and then you're not expecting that because the last time you rolled up to a stop sign, you had to chip in with the mechanical brakes, whereas in the Ioniq 9, it's got like 4 different regen settings. I mean, there's off, of course, but then there's low, medium, high, plus that I pedal, that one pedal mode. Now, you noted that you don't like the fact that you have to re-engage one pedal each and every time you get in the vehicle or put it back in drive. I don't mind that, and I much prefer it to what's going on here.
So we're in the Hyundai Ioniq 9 now, and I gotta say, one of the things that stands out to me the most was how much easier it is to get used to all the controls in here.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we get into a lot of different vehicles, you know, pretty much every week. And yes, I'm a big proponent of opening your owner's manual if you buy a vehicle, but if you're renting one or, I don't know, driving a friend's vehicle, you should just be able to get in and very quickly figure it out. I gotta say, the VF9 was probably the longest ever for me in terms of actually figuring out how everything worked.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that everything is centralized in that one touchscreen. Even controls like fixing your mirrors or adjusting your steering wheel, it's very clunky. And even for people like us who are really good at adjusting to new vehicles, I was confused as heck in that car.
Yeah, because you need to go to the touchscreen, navigate to the little icon that shows you that that's where you're going to access your different controls, and then you use the controls on the left side of the steering wheel and save the profile, as opposed to this. Yes, it's a top trim, but you know, you adjust it on the side of the seats down here on the side of the steering column, and then you've got 2 memory buttons right here. Just save it and off you go. Generally, I like the layout, the look of that infotainment screen, but there were some issues. Some of them were also weird. After I recorded the review of the VF9, had some issues where the windows were down, and then I got notifications saying that they were obstructed and couldn't close, but there was nothing in the way. And then I just tried again and they closed no problem. But it's all just kind of, you know, symptomatic of these issues that this thing is having. Whether they're kind of glitches, whether they're, you know, things that can be fixed with over-the-air updates, I'm not so sure, but it's definitely bizarre.
I really love the fact that in the Hyundai there are physical buttons, even though there's this touch capacitive panel down here. I love the fact that there's a separate control panel for climate control and all these really useful shortcuts. It just makes the whole thing so much easier to use. You don't need to go into your user manual if you don't want to.
Yeah, and I mean, even the regen braking, right? In the VF9, you have to access that stuff through the touchscreen. Once again, here, it's paddles on the steering wheel, so it's very simple, and it's also easier to adjust on the fly. Let's say you have somebody with you that isn't used to an EV, isn't used to regen braking, and they start to feel motion sick. You can quickly shut that system off just by pulling this paddle on the right-hand side a few times, versus in the VF9, you have to take your eyes off the road and click these icons on the touchscreen again. So it's just another way that this is more, I don't know, well thought out, I think.
Yeah, I would say the whole thing is much more cohesive. You know, Hyundai really nailed it on all the details, all those little things that kind of stick out to us in the VinFast. They're not issues here.
Some might even say it's pretty impressive.
The other thing that I love in this Ioniq 9 is how family friendly it is.
Yes.
They thought about the practicality stuff so well. There's tons of little cubbies for small item storage. You know, everyone gets a fast charging USB port in this top trim. And a lot of these compartments are rubberized, right? So stuff isn't flying around. It's those little details.
The other thing is, in this top trim, this whole center console slides. So if you've got kids in the back seat and you want to give them access to stuff, there's that bin underneath, whatever it is, or if you want to keep it away from them, you can pull it all the way forward, which is cool. Now, the same thing existed in the Ioniq 5, but this one actually slides more. So again, it's another way that Hyundai has kind of learned with time. It's improved its product, and you see it here. This is kind of a shining example of that. And then again, I don't want to seem like we're really kind of harping on the VF9, but there are some weird quirks. Like every time you get in and out of it, the third row climate controls are just like blowing at different speeds. You can really hear the fan. The frustration is I decided to sort of embrace it the other day, but it wasn't blowing very cold because I think the system is isolated to the front. So by the time the air gets back there, it's not even that cold. Whereas in this thing, there's actually two separate units to keep cold air moving in the front and back half of the cabin. But that's just another little quirk, and maybe it's something that could be addressed with updates, but it stands out. Whereas here, it's just, again, more, I don't know, there's a better execution overall, and it feels like a more finished product right from the factory.
Totally, and just one more thing, even stuff like getting into the third row, tumbling the seats, it's way easier in the Hyundai than it is in the VinFast. Again, a little bit clunky in the VF9. I feel like everything is just more seamless here, and it all comes together so nicely.
Yeah, because you can tilt the seat forward, but only if you reach your hand way behind and pull this little strap, and that means if you've got a car seat installed, that's the only way to get to the third row, whereas in here there are buttons that you do it, and it's power, and it just tilts forward. Very easy. And then the last thing, both of these have cameras galore, but the quality of the ones in the VF9 are just terrible.
They're like from 1990 or something.
Yeah, the frame rate is just really bad, and it makes it hard to park this thing because, you know, if you're backing into a spot against a wall, that wall just kind of suddenly creeps up on you. You have to be very, very careful. And the other thing I find weird, there's only one USB-C port in the VF9, and it's on the back of the center console. Whereas in here, you've got 3 of them down low. There's wireless chargers in here. Both of them work. They don't seem to be working in the VF9 that we're testing. Again, these are all criticisms, but there's stuff that could be addressed, and that's why I don't think it's a bad vehicle. It just needs a little bit of work.
Yeah, I think when you look at the basics of an EV, all the things are there, but it's just they kind of beefed it on these little details, and all of those little details on their own, not so bad, but when you combine them all together, it's kind of a red flag.
Yeah.
The VinFast VF9 might not be on the same level as the Hyundai Ioniq 9, but it's also not a bad EV. It just needs some improvements here and there. But the Ioniq 9 happens to be really, really good, even if it is really expensive, just like the VF9.
Yeah, there's no hiding from the high price of admission. You're looking at about 77 grand to start for this thing, or 81,000 bucks for this Plus version. And to make matters worse, this one's got a whole bunch of extras that add about 5 grand to the asking price. Now, that isn't much more than the 84 grand or so you are going to pay for a fully loaded Ioniq 9, although that doesn't make these prices any easier to stomach.
The good news is that there are more affordable versions of the Ioniq 9 to pick from, which makes that outstanding 3-row EV even more appealing.
Put her there, pal.